Hi guys, welcome to today's lesson. What we're going to do is build a real-time streaming data and analytics service or solution inside AWS. We're going to use a couple of different services in the big data and streaming world, and you'll really get a feel for the ecosystem as we go along. We're going to use the Kinesis Data Generator to create data for this solution. We're going to actually stream that data. We've used the Kinesis Data Generator a few times now on the channel. There is a setup video as well. I will do this from scratch. So if this is your first time watching a video or interacting with the Kinesis Data Generator, I will cover on how to create that, how to create it and what it does, but it'll be very quick, very brief. And if you want more information, I advise you go check out one of the other videos on the channel. So we're going to use the Kinesis Data Generator, and that's going to place data onto Kinesis Firehose. So Kinesis Firehose is the native AWS streaming service that allows us to stream data straight into S3 in a kind of mini batch mode, but still in real-time streaming. Once on S3, this data, we're actually going to use Athena. And Athena is actually a big data query engine that service that AWS provides to let you query data that sits in S3 without having to move it to something more relational. And this actually utilizes a Hive metastore. So we're going to create a Hive metastore as well using an AWS catalog. So quite a few things going on today. So to do this, we're going to use the Kinesis Data Generator. We're going to need two S3 buckets, and I'll explain why in a minute. One to stream data to, and the other one's actually needed for Athena. We're going to use Kinesis Firehose, and as I said there, we're going to use Athena. Okay, so let's just jump into the console and we'll get started creating the things we need. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need is two S3 buckets. I'm actually going to operate out of the London region today, so I haven't actually configured a lot of these services before in this region and within this account, so we'll get a really good feel for what's going on. So let's create a bucket. I am going to give my bucket a name. So remember, this has to be DNS compliant and it has to be globally unique within the whole of AWS, not just your own account. So I'm just going to prefix it with an A, and that means it'll come up first in my list. So this one's going to be A. This is going to be the S3 streaming bucket. And I'm just going to call this Johnny Chivers on the end, and hopefully no one else is using my name. So S3 streaming bucket. So back to the diagram, that's going to be this bucket here where the data lands. So let's just go on ahead and click next. Yeah, we'll just accept all the defaults. I'm actually going to delete this when we're done, so there's nothing really to configure here. So let's create that bucket. Great. And as I said, we're going to need a second bucket as well. It's not actually on the diagram, but this is a place where when we use Athena, when we query the data, in the end, it needs a place to write down the queries. So I'm just going to create a new bucket for this. You can use an existing bucket, but just don't use the bucket that you're streaming to, okay? So don't use the bucket you're streaming to. Use another bucket that already exists, or alternatively, create a new bucket and keep things nice and clean. So I'm just going to prefix that with A again. I'm going to call this Athena queries, and then I'll put my name on the end again, and then hopefully that will be completely unique within the Amazon system. And accept all the defaults. And that bucket is off and has been created. Excellent. Okay, now the buckets are created. What we're going to do next is actually create the Kinesis Data Generator. That's just so I can show you what the data is going to look like before we create the stream, and then we'll get a good idea and feel for what we're doing. So let's go to Kinesis Data Generator. I'll put a link in the description below. Let's click the help button. The help button. Let's create a new user with CloudFormation. So we just click that. We're up here. Make sure you select the region that you're working out of. It defaults into Oregon, but actually I'm working out of London. So let's create it in London. Let's click next. Standard stuff. I'm going to call mine demo and give it a password. Again, don't forget the password, because if you forget the password, you have to delete the stack and recreate it. So let's just call this demo. Let's go next. Let's not save that. I have a CloudFormation full access one, gives it all the necessary permissions to create what it needs in the background to give access to the Kinesis Data Generator. Don't feel like you have to give full access at this point. Use a role that's appropriate. This is more than enough, but for speed, I'm just going to do that. As I said, I'm not really going to go over everything on the Kinesis Data Generator today. We've already covered that. There's a video, as I said, already on the channel, so just accept everything and create the stack. Right, this will take 3 or 4 minutes. What I'm going to do is pause the video here, and we will pick it up when the Kinesis Data Generator CloudFormation stack has ran. Okay, as you can see, that is the Cognito user for the Kinesis Data Generator completed. Now remember, you have to go to outputs, and then we click on the link, and that brings us to the Kinesis Data Generator page where we can log in. Always happens that you go back to the original page rather than the one that's been created. So click on the link, type in your password, sign in. Okay, we'll configure this in a second after we do our stream. What we're going to do first is delete out the contents that is there, and I will provide, as usual, on Bitbucket the code that I'm putting in. We've covered how to use this record template in past lessons, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. One of the key things that we've done though with this template is that we have created a prefix, so it's Mrs., Dr., Mrs., Miss, Mr., etc. First name, last name, ID, which is a number, and then an IP address, which is a string. So again, we cover this in other lessons. Feel free to go check them out if you want to know more about what's happening here. Alternatively, copy and paste, and essentially that just becomes the data that we're going to send to our Kinesis Firehose stream. Excellent. So now we've done that, what we need to do is go back and actually create the stream. So let's go to Kinesis. On the Kinesis, let's go and create a delivery stream, Firehose delivery stream. We need to give the stream a name. I'm going to call it test stream 1. No, that's a bad name. We're going to call this IP stream. IP stream. So this is streaming the IP addresses that are going to be produced by the Kinesis Data Generator. And again, that's just a tool for producing data. It's nothing to do with the actual AWS solution. That could be anything. That could be log data. That could be data from Internet of Things. That could be database data that's constantly changing. So, but in this example, it's just a tool to get data onto a stream. Okay, so we're going to use Kinesis. We're going to call it IP stream. Perfect. We're going to directly put records sources. Yep. Okay, how do we want to send it? Well, that's all fine. Grand. Let's accept that and go next. Okay, data transformation. So what's really important here is the fact that we're going to use Athena to read this data. And if we want to make this nice and quick and fast for Athena, there is a file format called Parquet by Apache, which is great for data lakes and big data. And essentially what it does is it compresses big data down in size, but also provides metadata in the file itself, so it's easily queried, and you already have column headers. It's a bit like, it's almost a different way of creating a delimited file, but it's its own special format called Parquet. Won't go into it too much, but actually we're going to do that transformation. So let's enable the data transformation. Sorry, let's keep that disabled. Let's enable the converted record transformation. We're going to convert to Apache Parquet. Okay. Next thing we need to do is select a glue region for a AWS data catalog. Okay. So in order for Athena to read the data that sits in S3, it needs an external Hive metastore or a Hive metastore that tells it how the data looks on the S3. So basically, we're going to provide it a schema. So if we go back into our Kinesis Firehose and we want to manually create a new table in Glue, let's click this and open this link. And we go into the Glue console. So I'm still in London. I need to give this table a name and a database name. So as I said, I've never been in here before, and this is my first time. So we're going to call the table IP streaming, and I'm going to put it in a database called, and we're going to add a database, and I'm going to call this database Big Data. So Big Data, create that database, table name, IP streaming, next. Okay, data store. So we're going to store it in S3, and it wants a bucket path to put the data into. So we already created this, and we called it our A3 streaming bucket, and I post suffixed Johnny Chivers on the mind to make it unique. So we're just going to stream straight into that bucket, and we're going to click next. It's going to be in Parquet format. when it arrives. And then we get to actually add our columns. So let's add a column. So if we just quickly go back to Kinesis Data Generator, you'll see we have prefix, first name, last name, ID, and IP. So these actually then need added to the schema. So the first thing is prefix, and that is a string. We won't have a partition key in this example, so just ignore that. So that's column number 1. Then we'll have first name, and that is also a string. Then we'll have last name, and that is also a string. Then if we just quickly jump back, we're going to have ID, which is going to be an integer, and IP, which is a string. So ID, and there is a big int, so we'll choose a big int in case things get pretty big. And then we'll add IP, which is a string. So IP, add. So prefix, first name, last name, ID, IP, and these are the order of the columns. Okay, pretty happy with that. Let's go next. So we're going to store it here, which we've already discussed. It's going to be Parquet. These are the column names, and it's going to be found in a database that I'm creating called Big Data and IP Streaming. Again, we do have theory videos on this channel on how this all works. It's not a deep dive in this lesson. It's more about getting the solution working. So for now, just think about it. I'm creating a database. I'm creating a table. I'm creating these columns, and this is all going to be a Hive metastore where the schema is stored, and that will allow us to read the data once we start streaming. So let's click finish, and that's it created. Okay, so there'll be nothing in there yet. The schema is created. We haven't moved any data. This is what it's going to look like: prefix, first name, last name, ID, IP, which is coming from our Kinesis Data Generator once we start streaming. Back in the Firehose. Okay, so we're operating out of the London region. We're going to use big data. We're going to use IP streaming, and we just want to use the latest version of the table. And we're changing it all into Apache Parquet. So it's going to come in as JSON format, which looks like this. And we're going to create it into a file format called Parquet, which means we can query that data easily using Athena. Cool. Let's go. Next. Okay, S3 is the only available destination because you enabled the record format. That's perfectly fine. Okay, you can analyze the data delivery. Make sure you choose this bucket. Okay, so to analyze the data, we must use that bucket. So that's just put in that bucket. And what that means then is that we are able to deliver and query that data in that bucket. Perfect, that's what we want to do. We'll leave the defaults as they are. No need to worry about them now, and we won't back it up. So that's us. Let's go next. Oh, buffer size. Okay, so let's make this the smallest buffer size we can, which is 64. And let's make it the smallest time interval we can, which is 60. And the reason I'm doing this is because this is a demo and we want to see the data quick. So you can buffer the data down under the S3 off the stream by size, or you can buffer it by time. Up to you. You need to pick the best one that suits your use case, but for today, I'm picking the two smallest limits, so the lower limits, just for speed. Compression is disabled. Apache Parquet actually compresses the file slightly anyway from JSON, so perfect. S3 encryption disabled, so we're just using the default encryption on the S3 in this example. We'll tag it. Okay, permissions. So I'm just going to let it create a rule. This rule just lets it have all the minimum permissions it needs to do its job. It's quick, it's easy, it's a bit dirty, but it's fine for this example. If you need to do more granular stuff, obviously go create a rule and then choose an existing rule once you're done. But for the purpose of this demo, we're just going to let it create what it needs. Next, review. Okay, so that's all perfect. Let's create the stream. And this should take just a few seconds. So create the stream. AWS is thinking about doing its changing screen. Okay, that took a few minutes, but the stream is finally created. As you can see, it's active. So let's jumping back into the Kinesis Data Generator. So as I said, we're working out of EU West 2 today. We have IP stream ready to go. We'll send 5 records a second. We'll not compress it, and we will then send the data. So let's just double check everything was correct. Send the data. So I'll send the data, and that'll start off and running. So what's happening now? The Kinesis Data Generator is sending the data to Firehose. Firehose is then writing the data down to S3 either every 60 seconds or when it reaches the minimum amount of memory that I specified. And this S3 bucket then just builds up a series of objects, which are Parquet files, and those Parquet files contain the data. And what we're going to do next is then use Athena to query that data via, it actually uses Presto, which is an SQL big data query engine, but we'll go into more detail when we get there. So let's just jump back into the console. Let's go to S3. Let's go into the bucket that the data is streaming into. And currently nothing yet. So I'll pause the video. It might take 60 seconds for the first object to arrive. As soon as that arrives, I'll turn the video back on. Okay, that took about 30 odd seconds for the first kind of object to arrive into the bucket. So the way it's written down is by the year, then by the date, and then what we end up in essentially is this partition along the top with the time of night, which is 2100 for me. And these are the objects, so you can see it's like a .parquet file. And this is being created by the stream. So far, if we jump quickly back in, we've sent nearly 500 records on the stream. So let's just give this up to 600 records, and that'll give us a little bit of data to work with. I'll start the video again when we get to 600 records. Okay, it was just past the 600 record mark, so I'm just going to stop sending that data. Obviously costs you money putting on the stream, so if we just stop it now, we've only paid a few pennies for this solution so far. So let's go back in. So now you can see we have two objects. Okay, so this is Parquet format. It may be your first time working with Parquet format, but as I explained earlier in the video, it's an Apache file type, great for working with big data. It contains metadata, like column headers essentially, so you can query the data easily. So for the purposes of this, I'll tell you what, we'll download a file and we'll just take a quick look at it. So if I download that file, and I will use Vim just to show you what that file looks like. So if I load up a terminal window, you don't have to do this. This is just to show you what the file looks like. So when it got sent from the Kinesis Data Generator, it looked like this. Our Kinesis stream, is actually then converting it into Apache Parquet format, which is great for big data queries. Compresses the data and contains metadata, making it easily readable. So that's now landed on our S3 bucket. I've just downloaded a sample of that data. And what we'll do is we'll take a look at that data in Vim. So I'll just load up Vim, drop that in, hit enter, and as you can see, it's its complete own coding. Completely own encoding. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to the naked human eye. So to get out of Vim, if you have done that, don't forget it's :Q. Many people get stuck in Vim. I'm just going to clear this screen quickly. Not all hope is lost though. You can download certain tools that let you work with Parquet format on your desktop. A good one's called Parquet Tools. I won't go into it too much in this demo, what exactly it does, but what it allows to do is actually look at the data. So if I say Parquet Tools cat JSON, and then I drop the file in this time, we should be able to see that output in JSON format. Bit of a warning, but there you go. So rather than that gobbledygook we had before, you can now see that the data is actually being streamed like this into the S3 bucket, albeit it's in Parquet format. Great. But what happens if I actually want to query that data on AWS? So let's jump quickly back into AWS. So the data is now landed in the S3 bucket. I want to look at that data. I don't want to look at it like gobbledygook, and I don't want to have to download it. And in fact, I have more data than I can download onto a hard drive. Well, that's where AWS Athena comes in. So Athena is a SQL big data query engine library, and it lets you query data directly as it sits on S3, and it works great with that Parquet format that we've created. So let's go set up Athena from scratch, and then let's query that data, get some analytics going. So back into the console. Let's go to Athena. Sorry, can't spell. Let's go to Athena. Okay, get started. First time I've ever done this in the London region. So the most important thing to do before you even start, and this gets a lot of people stumped, is you have to set up a location for your query results to go to. So if you remember at the start, we actually created two buckets, and that was two buckets, and I said the second bucket would come in handy later. This is where it comes in handy. So let's just go grab that second bucket name. I prefixed it with an A, so it's top of my list and it's easy to grab. Go back into Athena. Okay, so what you want then is S3 : / bucket name. So I just copied and pasted that in. Now, You can put a folder name on. I'm just going to keep it at the highest level. Really quick demo. Completely up to you what you want to do. And don't forget, don't use this name. You have to create your own bucket that's globally unique. And don't use the same one that you're streaming to, or else the data will become muddied with query results from Athena and then actually streaming into the bucket. So let's save that. Oh, you need to put a / sorry, then save that, and we're back in. So now we have a place where our results are saved. I will put these queries as well, and I'm about to type up onto Bitbucket, or sorry, up onto GitHub, and that will let you kind of just copy and paste them in if you want, if you're not really comfortable querying yourself. So as I said, this is just quite simply a SQL text editor, if you want to think of it that way. So you have to select the database you want to use. So if you remember back to the Glue Data Catalog, I had a database that I created called Big Data, and then I had that table IP streaming, and then we had the prefix, first name, last name, ID, and IP, which is now that data sitting in Parquet format in the S3 bucket, and this is a Hive metastore that lets us query that data. So that data resides in the S3 bucket, and then we apply the schema as we read that data up. So it's not like a traditional database. It's actually of a data lake concept, and that's what we're working in here. So just follow along. So let's do the first thing. Let's do what everyone does when you get the SQL. So SQL is a declarative language. So the first thing you do is select. Then we're going to do select star, which means give me everything, all the columns from. And then let's specify the database. Now I'm going to qualify it with with quotes just for cleanness purposes. So IP streaming, and let's run that query. There you go. So to run that query, you actually hit Control Enter, by the way, just to let you know. So Control Enter lets you run the query. So Control Enter. And as you can see, there's all this beautiful data brought back really, really quickly. It was under 2.2 seconds, and we're querying that object straight on S3. So it's great for this kind of work. Okay, so there's query number one. Let's do a different query. Okay, so let's say we want to group by and get counts of all the prefixes. So we have millions of rows of data. In real life, in this example, we have just a couple of hundred, but in real life, let's say you have millions of rows of data and you want to know the counts of like the misses and the doctors and you know, the misters in your data. And you know, think about this in real life situations. If you're working in the stock market, you start to get counts and groups of tick data really quickly, follow new trends and patterns. So just follow along again. If you're not really familiar with the SQL language, I'm going to put these queries up on GitHub, copy and paste them down, or you can type along with me. So again, select. So what we want is a select. Then what we want is, if we just open up this, we want that prefix column. So smalls, prefix column. And then what we're going to do is follow along, is count that prefix. Oops, typo. Prefix as, and we've just given the output a name, column name. Then give it a capital and a from. Then give it our table name, which is IP-streaming. And then we need a group by. And I'll explain this query in a little second. Prefix. Every time. So what we're doing here is saying, give me the prefixes. Count all the prefixes, but group them by the prefix itself. So we're going to end up with a list of prefixes once, the number of those occurrences of that prefix in the data. So again, once you're done, you can actually format the query by clicking format, and it does a bit of formatting for you, and then Control and Enter and let it off and run onto your data. Okay, that was 2.5 seconds to return that data. And as you can see, we now have our prefixes and then the counts of those prefixes in the database. So in summary, what we've done is we've used the Kinesis Data Generator to produce data, just as data streaming. This could be anything you want, as I said, Internet of Things, log data, on-premise databases that you want to stream data from, anything to your heart's content. We've placed it on a Kinesis Firehose Delivery stream, which as we move it into an S3 location as a data lake, we have changed the file format to Parquet, which is a great big data file format that lets query data and let us know information of the metadata at the same time. So because we've changed it into Parquet format, we then used Athena, where we've created a Hive metastore in AWS that knows the schema of this data, and then that's let us run queries against that data as it sits in S3. So I hope you find today's lesson useful. It's quite in depth as the lab goes. I've put all the resources as usual on my website, www.johnnychivers.co.uk. And until next time, thank you very much.